UEFA had piloted the 16-team games in England naturally, and it had done okay. Nostalgia aside, it was a serviceable tournament, but nothing to write home about from a neutral standpoint. Now though, modern football was really here. We had all your favourites, from Zinedine Zidane and Luis Figo to Raul and Francesco Totti. It was the new millennium, optimism was in the air, two countries spread the load of what had finally become a true festival of football as UEFA tried to paint it in their sickly colours. This is Euro 2000, perhaps the greatest ever. Midway through the qualification for Euro 96 in England, UEFA looked down at their expensive half-eaten plate of slop known as the European Championships with their full tummies and knew that they had overfaced themselves. England could host a 16-team championships on short notice, but they were one of few nations who could. Germany, France, Spain and Italy had proven in the past they could do so. But outside of that, UEFA had to get inventive. They knew they had to eat their food, and in spreading the meal known as Euro 2000 across two able countries, the plate was cleared. So in July 1995, Belgium and the Netherlands were selected to share the hosting rights for the first Euros of the new millennium. Immediately, it appeared they had fucked up, shunning Amsterdam and its new Amsterdam Arena for the final, and instead referring the denouement of the championships to Rotterdam. Whilst De Kuip and the port city of Rotterdam didn't have the glamour, the reputation or the sheen attached to it, it remains widely known as the most atmospheric stadium in the Netherlands. For obvious reasons, Heysel in Brussels was never going to be in contention for the rights to the final. With two hosts qualifying automatically, the runners and riders were given a slightly harder task to reach the competition. Yet, with 14 places available, it could be said that the newborn Croatia were the only notable absentees. In their place, we had the likes of Germany, who had lurched from disaster to disaster since the winning of Euro 96. The more the new millennium poked its head around the corner, the more the summer of 1996 appeared to be the outlier. In a field of honking sheep shit that was the unified Germany's 1990s, with its shock eliminations in the World Cup to Bulgaria and Croatia, was the one polished turd of Euro 96. Even their appearance in the prior finals in 1992 wasn't all that majestic in retrospect. There wasn't any signs of those heroics in the build-up to Euro 2000. Despite Bertie Vogt's warning the DFB before, during and after their 1996 triumph in England, nobody had listened to his concerns about a lack of quality coming through the system. Whilst the German FA finally got to the problem at source and fast-tracked its antidote following France 98, the rewards would not be reaped in time for Euro 2000. If the disease that had spread quietly in the background was beginning to be cured, on the pitch in the here and now, Germany's football still looked terminal. Votes had gone and left behind a chasm, a game of hot potato, as nobody wanted to touch the job in fear it could taint their reputation, and the thin pool of names that were selected by the DFB that had taken on a desire to become the national team manager were quickly rebuffed by the fans. Legend Paul Breitner was offered the job, but he quickly withdrew his ticket after fan revolt. There was no interest in Ulis Delike either, and when the DFB had the guts to offer the job of German manager to an Englishman in Roy Hodgson, there were nearly riots. The DFB had to rush to their contacts book. They had to go all the way back to the yellowed pages that were still stuck together with time and forgetfulness. In came Erik Ribbeck, to cries of "Who the fuck is Erik Ribbeck?" from the rest of the continent, and admittedly quite a lot of Germany. Erik Ribbeck had been Jupp Dorval's assistant manager in the national team that had appeared in consecutive tournament finals and had won Bayer Leverkusen's first European trophy. Fantastic news, a bit of tournament winning pedigree was much needed, until it was remembered that was back in the 1980s and Ribbeck had spent much of the 90s in semi-retirement. And when he wasn't in semi-retirement, he was bounced from rock to hard place in failed stints back at Leverkusen and at Bayern Munich. At 61, he was the oldest manager of the national team. But the main thing is that they qualified even if they needed a nerve-shredding goalless draw against Turkey to seal it on the final day. So desperate were Germany for talent that they desperately unearthed German ancestors for Bayer Leverkusen's Paulo Rink. The Brazilian-born forward would repay his new country with 0 goals from 13 matches. Although the reintroduction of the ancient Lothar Matthäus hadn't helped in France '98 and certainly wasn't going to be a positive factor in 2000 thanks to his own semi-retirement in MLS, a band of Bayern players still had the idea to overthrow Ribbeck with Matthäus. Maybe they were so desperate to take Matthäus off the pitch that bestowing him the gift of the German manager's job might have kept him on the sidelines. They would look out on being automatically seeded, courtesy of being reigning champions, but when the draw was made, another false German dawn was evident. Even though UEFA had seeded the countries correctly this time with 4 teams in each pot based on their rankings, out of the lowest ranked pot came England. They could have had Turkey, who had laboured to a playoff position behind Germany and had only scraped into the championships on away goals against Ireland. They could have had Slovenia, who shockingly dispatched of a once again unfortunate Ukraine in the playoffs thanks to the incredible Milinko Aksimovic and his ludicrous lob from halfway. They could have had Denmark, who, despite being 1992 champions and posted a record quarter-final at France '98, had significantly gone backwards and were only at the tournament thanks to being paired off with Israel in the playoffs. But to be fair, England had also contested those same playoffs, and they were also frightfully lucky to be participating at the tournament at all. Their campaign to even reach the championships was amid choppy waters even before Glenn Hoddle decided to punch down on disabled kids in a bizarre comment that he has even more bizarrely been able to hide behind on the grounds of religious beliefs. Kevin Keegan just about steered England to calmer seas, even if they did need an abundance of favours from the vastly superior Sweden to scrape into a playoff. England and Keegan couldn't even have peace in the 2-legged tie when Scotland were pulled out of the hat. 2 Paul Scholes goals looked to have eased the pressure in Hampden's first leg, before Scotland put in an almighty shift at Wembley, winning via Don Hutchison, and probably should have taken England's place. The Tartan Army wouldn't return to the tournament until it returned to England in 2021. Rounding out Group A were 2 teams who had battled through qualifying together. Romania had shown there was life in their golden generation yet when taking 4 points off Portugal in an impressively unbeaten campaign, and as Portugal's own glittering stars peaked together, they did enough to qualify as the best ranked second place team. They held off Turkey thanks to goal difference, Turkey who followed up their adequate display at Euro 96 with another qualification through the aforementioned playoffs. They'd be drawn into Group B with co-host Belgium and were seen as enough of a threat thanks to a mixture of a good crop of Turkish players coming through and Belgium being totally abject. Belgium had belatedly realised that they hadn't the foggiest clue on how to develop youth talent, and their Vision 2000 plan of action was set up far too late in the game to inspire any change out of the national team in time for the Euros. Whilst it would reap rewards eventually, much like Germany, they'd have to wait a decade to be on the receiving end of some kind of benefit. Alongside the aforementioned Sweden, Italy were the headline name to be drawn into Group B, but had hardly followed up on hosting the World Cup and a final 4 years beyond that. They'd bounced out of a Euro 96 group phase amidst Arrigo Sacchi qualification, and despite a glut of attacking talent coming through and a stereotypical collection of hard-nosed and clever goalkeepers and defenders locked in, they fell to penalties at France '98 and limped over the line to qualify under Dino Zoff. If Group A was the tournament's group of death based solely on reputation alone, Group C was a candidate for the group of life, despite featuring the only seeded team that had won their place as top seeds on form. According to UEFA, Spain were the best team on the continent at that time, and whilst Real Madrid had just come off their second Champions League triumph in 3 years and their national team was filled to the brim with talent, the underlying issue of their frail psyche remained. After quarter-final exits at the 1994 World Cup and Euro 96, as well as failing to get out of a France 98 group featuring Nigeria, Paraguay and Bulgaria, Spain were expected to once again fail to deliver on their abundance of promise. From Pot 2, Spain received Norway, allegedly the third best team in Europe. Whilst they had shown evidence of a decent generation at World Cups, appearing in the knockout stages in 1998, their talent pool appeared to be slowing down. The fact that they had yet to return to the Euros is ample evidence of this. From the lower reaches of the draw, Spain also received a Yugoslavia, much diminished though because of disqualifications and a litany of nations and therefore talented footballers gaining independence. This would be the last European Championships under the Yugoslavia name, as they would be officially known as the former Republic of Yugoslavia, as they had done at France 98 and would do so for qualification in 2002 before their renaming to Serbia and Montenegro from Euro 2004. Slovenia, who bested Ukraine in the playoffs and the fourth team in Group C, were a reminder of the recent scars in the healing process of the Yugoslav wars. So were Bosnia and Herzegovina, who participated in their first European Championship qualifiers. Alongside Montenegro, they remain the last former Yugoslav state to not play in the Euros. If Group A was deemed the group of death, Group D swatted aside those bold claims and offered the world actual evidence. We had the 1988 winners, the 1992 winners, the 1996 finalists and the reigning world champions. Whilst we've discussed Denmark and realised they're probably not up to much, we also could count on the co-host Netherlands to bright up the tournament in their sea of Oranje. However, in Frank Rijkaard, the Dutch had an inexperienced manager and a team in rotten form, thanks to a 1999 that passed by without a single win. There was a mind-blowing 5-5 draw with fellow host Belgium, as well as a home loss to Morocco. Yes, those were the highlights from a once again turbulent Dutch team. A repeat of 96 would certainly mean disaster. It certainly appeared on the cards when you took into account a dazzling Czech Republic. Yes, they may have followed up their unfortunate Euro 96 final loss with a complete failure to qualify for France 98, but they were coming off the back of their best ever qualifying campaign. They'd become only the second team to whitewash qualification with a 100% record, and did so in more games than France had done previously. They'd win their group by a staggering 12 points. You could have added the efforts of the Faroe Islands, Malta, San Marino, Luxembourg debutants, Andorra, Belarus and Moldova to second place Scotland's tally, and still the Czechs would have bounced into the tournament. Speaking of France, they were the reigning champions of the world and surely favourites to go again and repeat the feat of West Germany from the 1970s. They had improved through the transition of Aim Jacquet to Roger Lemaire. More players had peaked from their inaugural World Cup triumph back home. Since their semi-final defeat in 1996, Les Bleus could add to the firepower of Yuri Djorkaeff, Zinedine Zidane and Marcel Desailly, with the likes of Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira, David Trezeguet, Emmanuel Petit, Fabien Barthez, Didier Deschamps, Nicola Anelka and Robert Pires. Their talent pool, as ever, was frightening. Less scary, however, was their form in the haze of a World Cup hangover. They failed to score across 3 hours of football and 2 games against Ukraine, got beaten at home to Russia and drew in Iceland. Those same minnows caused them an incredible fright on the final match day when France needed to win. Leading 2-0 and appearing to swat their opponents aside, Iceland rallied to 2-2, a result which was putting Les Bleus out of the tournament. Fortunately, David Trezeguet became a hero, netting with barely minutes to spare. And Trezeguet becoming a late hero for France offers us that neat transition into the tournament itself. Germany had to wait for both hosts to get their show on the road, only postponing the inevitable in Liège against Romania. It took just 5 minutes for an entire nation's campaign to be exposed for what it really was, as Rafael Moldovan kept up his knack for scoring in competition finals. Romania should have destroyed the Germans, but as they lapped up chance after chance, they failed to convert another, as Germany escaped with a draw from a timely and brilliantly delivered equaliser thanks to Mehmet Scholl. England and Portugal must have drawn immense confidence from the porous display of both teams as they met over the border in Eindhoven. Euro 2000 witnessed probably the greatest start to a tournament from an English perspective, where the likes of Moore and Charlton, Shearer and Gaza and Kane and Maguire have labelled to difficult wins or even draws to kickstart successful championships. England of 2000 roared into a 2-goal lead in no time at all. Paul Scholes impishly headed in after 3 minutes, combining with United teammate David Beckham, just as he had done in the playoff to get England this far. Then Steve McManaman swept in a second mere weeks after he had scored that scissor kick in a Champions League final for Real Madrid. As such, England were in dreamland, until the alarm clock of an often debated goal woke them from their slumber. Was it a good goal? Don't you know it was deflected? The answer rightly is, who cares? Luis Figo twattered one in from 40 yards, and by the hour, England were 3-2 down. Tony Adams' tournament and effectively his England career was over thanks to injury, and David Seaman was labelled as a piece of meat with eyes by Spanish newspaper as. Arnhem appeared the inadequate venue for the second matchday's encounter between two rightful challengers to top spot in the group, based on the first matchday's proceedings. Portugal met Romania as the deaf, blind, dumb and wingless crows of England and Germany waited to pounce on any misstep. Romania expertly nullified Portugal's great threat of Luis Figo, who was comparatively given a hard time against the likes of Christian Kivu. Where the young defender couldn't affect Figo, however, was from dead ball delivery, where the soon-to-be Galactico delivered an inch-perfect cross for Costinha, who broke Romanian hearts in injury time. With just 1 point from 2 games, Romania deserves so much more than having to get a result against England to qualify. Meanwhile, Portugal were through no matter what, and given their opposition, probably coasting through as group winners. In what appeared the inadequately assigned venue of Stade du Pays in Charleroi, England met Germany. If the Euro 96 semi-final at Wembley was the 9-figure budget blockbuster made by a comic book franchise, Euro 2000's group stage encounter was a quiet director VHS release that wouldn't even be stocked by your local Woolworths. This, and I cannot stress this word enough, was dog shit. England were dog shit, Germany were dog shit, and the two teams met to see whose dog shit stunk the most. Apparently, it was Germany's, as Alan Shearer had to contort himself into a header to score the penultimate goal of his international career. Somehow, England were a point away from the quarter-finals, whilst Germany needed a miracle. A miracle is what they received in Rotterdam when Portugal showed up, chucked on their B team, and pumped Germany's full-strength 11 with 3 goals from Sergio Conceição. However, when your B team consists of Conceição and your opponent's strong 11 features a Lothar Matthäus who required a Zimmer frame, 3-0 shouldn't have been a shock to anybody, as Portugal strolled into the knockouts as group winners and Germany finished bottom of a group stage for the very first time. German tabloid Bild encapsulated a summer from hell perfectly when marking their front page with a picture of Zinedine Zidane next to a bratwurst in a Germany kit. Zidane, they said, was a footballer, whilst a sausage was a German footballer. Simultaneously, there was what amounted to a war crime being carried out in Charleroi. At half-time against a Romania who were without their talisman and good-time boy Georgie Hagi, England led thanks to a quick-fire double from Michael Owen and Alan Shearer. Romania had played well, freed from the shackles of playing through a tired, ageing Hagi who was missing through suspension. Again though, England's flurry had proved a false dawn when Romania took just 3 minutes to level the tie up in the second half. They had been defeated to top spot in their World Cup group 2 years prior and hadn't learned much of the lessons from '98. Nigel Martin, a last-minute replacement for perpetual number 1 and famous meat with eyes David Seaman, wasn't putting in a peak Lev Yashin or Gigi Buffon performance, but Romania continued to spurn immaculate chances as they had done against Germany. Needing just a point, England were more than happy to escape from the group with one, until the fateful last-minute penalty. Phil Neville has since declared his Manchester United career was saved by Peter Schmeichel and his stoppage time penalty save in an FA Cup semi-final against Arsenal in '99. Another tired challenge from the United defender resulted in another late penalty, but this time he couldn't be bailed out by the comparatively average Nigel Martin. Romania deservedly progressed as Phil Neville's England career was cut out from under him. He would go on to suffer rampant abuse by the tabloids and the supporters on the street as the nation's scapegoat, just as David Beckham had done 2 years prior. Not once did anybody stop to think about the root cause of England's constant failures, instead of attaching the blame at one man. The tournament was opened up with a bang, specifically a bang to the head for Roland Nielsen. In 2000, studies on concussions and head injuries impacting not only sporting performance but somebody's life was a million miles away. This was still the age of a player's personal pride taking precedent, some say still is, but even Nielsen was forced to submit at half-time, bringing his championships to an end. It was Nielsen who attempted to recover from his head injury by clumsily being robbed of the ball by Bart Gore in the build-up to the first goal of the tournament. When Nielsen was removed, Sweden's start didn't get much better, as Emil Impenza, the co-host's primary source of inspiration, doubled Belgium's advantage. Even if he did handle the ball to bring it under his spell. A handball, an opponent concussion and a suddenly rampant Belgian delirium and optimism, things that masked their true problems after night one. Italy endured a tough night against Turkey until Pippo Inzaghi was awarded a soft second-half penalty that eventually was converted by the supposedly fouled. It split the two teams, but Italy wouldn't be given as rough a ride in their next match in Brussels. It was a match where the pieces of the jigsaw started to serendipitously fall into place for Dino Zoff. After losing Gigi Buffon to a hand injury before the tournament, Francesco Totti kept his first clean sheet of the games. Francesco Totti stepped up with a 6-minute goal and soon stepped up as the Azzurri's best player, whilst teammates such as Demetrio Albertini and Stefano Fiore also played key roles, with the former chalking up an assist and the latter killing the game dead with a second in the second half. Much like Portugal, Italy had strolled into the quarter-finals and, without needing any knowledge of Sweden and Turkey's bore draw to be played out in Eindhoven, they topped the group. Out of the 0-0, it was obvious that Henrik Larsson wasn't up to speed leading the Sweden line and that Turkey were making progress, even if one local newspaper said it was at the speed of a turtle. Still, with their point apiece, they were both in with a chance of qualifying for the knockouts. Sweden would be up against an Italy team weakened by the comfort of top spot, assured, whilst Turkey met a Belgium team with more than a chance of victory. Belgium needed just a point, but went for all three in Brussels, yet were made to rue their failures in front of goal as Turkey resisted the waves of pressure and a Hakan Suker double either side of the break picked off a Belgium team. The Red Devils' misplaced over-exuberance could be encapsulated in Philippe de Vilder's reckless tackle that earned him a straight red with 6 minutes to play. It left an outfielder in net and no chance of a response. If Sweden replicated Turkey's result against Italy in Eindhoven, they'd be into the quarter-finals based on their superior coefficient. That would be rendered moot by Luigi Di Biagio's opener. If nothing, Sweden gave their opponents a go and Henrik Larsson did finally get his goal that his recovery deserved, even if Italy bit back immediately. In the end, the rightful pair probably went through, even if Italy didn't need to get out of second gear to be vastly superior to their opponents. We called it the Group of Life earlier, and the first matchday of Group C only reinforced that viewpoint with an absurd pair of matches. First off, a Spain team who had barraged through all opponents en route to Rotterdam came unstuck against a rudimentary but solid Norwegian outfit. The Scandinavians went route one to stymie the Spaniards, and because the Spanish were light years away from anything other than one-dimensional football, they fell for it. Norway didn't feel the absence of Ronny Johnsen at the heart of their defence because they were barely troubled all afternoon, even against the might of Geisker Mendieta and Raul. In fact, Norway came the closest until the deadlock was finally broken when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer glanced a header against the bar. The game would claim the international career of Jose Francisco Molina, who came for a long ball that he was never entitled to. His mistake allowed Stefan Iversen to head into an empty net and allowed Santi Canizares, who was somehow overlooked in place of the Atletico Madrid goalkeeper, to enter the team. By the time Iker Casillas earned his spot, however, both Molina and Canizares would be shit out of luck, as Molina never played for his country again after this fateful 9th appearance. After that contest gave a watching continent blue balls, the evening provided the surprise climax of Slovenia and Yugoslavia in a derby of sorts. Yugoslavia were the kingpin who have fallen on hard times, Slovenia the often overlooked apprentice on his first big job. Despite not seeing eye to eye with manager Srečko Katanec, the Mercurials Latko Zajovic bagged goals either side of the break and either side of Miran Pavlin's doubling of Slovenia's advantage. 3 goals to the good against their former paymasters, it would be an incredible introduction to tournament football for the young nation. Unfortunately, it would be as good as it ever got, unless Slovenia have done something absolutely incredible at Euro 2024 that I've not had a chance to see yet as I type this on Monday, May 13th. Controversial defender Sinisa Mihailovic added yet more spice to his career when he shoved an opponent to receive his marching orders. Yet, without him, Yugoslavia grew into the game thanks to their other talismanic figures. First, Savo Milosevic gave life to the game with a simple finish before Predrag Mijatovic assisted a quick-fire second, before a scarcely believable third was found thanks to Milosevic again. It took 6 minutes for it all to go wrong for Slovenia. It would take an even shorter amount of time for everything to go south for Yugoslavia later on in the competition. But first, the Yugoslavs had a chance to retort in Liège when they met Norway. The Scandinavians, if they played anything like the brutish team that thwarted Spain, would be into the quarter-finals without a doubt. Unfortunately, Yugoslavia needed just 8 minutes to find the net as Milosevic scored yet again. By the end, however, they were clinging on after Majeta Kezma needlessly received his country's second red card in as many games. John Carew should have restored parity late on, but skewed a glorious chance wide. After a barrage in the first hour of their tournament looked set to spell a premature end, Yugoslavia were suddenly top of the group and favourites to qualify. And this is because Spain belatedly got off the mark in Amsterdam. Raul's 4th-minute opener in the Dutch capital could have been the act to open up the floodgates. Instead, Spain were only prompted into winning the match when Zlatko Zahovic bagged his 3rd of the tournament on the hour. After an instant response, Spain desperately clutched onto 3 points, which left all 4 teams with still everything to play for on the final day. The permutations were simple as permutations went. A win for Norway, Yugoslavia or Spain meant qualification. A win for Slovenia, just as long as Spain and Yugoslavia didn't wild out in a high-scoring draw in Bruges, would also do it. Every team had the incentive and Group C got the fitting climax it deserved. Well, in Belgium, less so in the Netherlands where Norway and Slovenia were presented with the golden ticket to the chocolate factory of a Euros quarter-final, the like of which they would never see again. Unfortunately in Arnhem, both sides were frozen into fear and produced little to nothing on goal. Meanwhile in Bruges we were getting the tete-a-tete that the tournament had been crying out for, as Yugoslavia and Spain traded goals in quick-fire fashion that would have made Slovenian supporters even more tense. Then the game threatened to open up with a 3rd Yugoslavian red card in as many matches when Slavica Jokanovic was shown the door. Like their previous matches, it only spurred Yugoslavia on to overachieve as Slobodan Komlenovic kept up his bizarre acumen for finding a tournament goal as he netted only his 3rd goal for his nation, and yet all 3 had been at major tournaments, following on from 2 at France 98. Now was the time for Spain to go gung-ho, and Jose Antonio Camacho went there and then some. With Ismail Azais, Pedro Menaites, Joseba Exteperia, Raul Alfonso and Gaisca Mendieta all on the pitch, Spain's efforts looked to be going into the bin as they trailed 3-2 into second half stoppage time. Just a peek over the border to see what Norway and Slovenia are doing? Nope, didn't think so. Stefan Iversen was right to have placed a significant amount of money on Norway's games to be goal-shy. Whilst it helped bankroll a post-tournament holiday, his nation's own profligacy risked bringing that forward a couple of weeks. And yet still, as the 4th official raised the minimum of 4 added minutes, Norway were tiptoeing through on 4 points and a single goal. Then they found their exit. Spain rediscovered their re-entry and Yugoslavia desperately clutched on to a scapegoat in the hopes that they would come out in the wash. Jules Vissier was branded as biased as the added time overran and Spain searched for and got 2 incredibly late goals to prolong their party in the lowlands. First, Mendieta converted on 94 minutes to breathe life back into the game, even if Spain needed 1 more goal to qualify. Then Yugoslavia buckled once more, expecting time to expire but not factoring in the stoppages for the penalty and the goal, and Alfonso became a national hero for his 95th minute winner. As their world collapsed around them, Yugoslavia found solace in Norway's failures to grip onto a spot in the quarter-finals, while Spain also made for a relieved barnacle onto the side of the barge that powered through the Dutch and Belgian canals. Group D, conversely, a land of fewer washed-up barnacles as the true group of death got underway after the false start of the Belgians that were tasked with opening the tournament. Like Belgium had been, the Dutch had been reserved for their final match of the evening, so the co-hosts, alongside their opponents Czech Republic, had to endure the sheer terror of watching a masterclass from the reigning world champions against Denmark. Whenever France and Denmark met in a European Championship, the winner of the tie had eventually produced the winner of the tournament. It still does, and did so at the 1998 World Cup. Unfortunately, this spell would be broken at subsequent tournaments in Japan and South Korea, as well as Qatar, even if a 2018 draw did result in France topping their group and winning in Russia too. Out of the history lessons and into the footballing lesson that France taught a reckless Danish side who both couldn't find the net despite chances and couldn't hold down a firm defensive line. A marauding Laurent Blanc found himself in the opposition penalty area to gobble up an open net after Anelka had been thwarted by Peter Schmeichel before Thierry Henry scored a classic Thierry Henry finish and Sylvain Wiltord wrapped things up in stoppage time. They'd moseyed on through the game, not hitting full stride and could have been better at both ends, but looked domineering all the same. That evening's winner between Netherlands and the Czech Republic would, in all likelihood, produce the contender to France's Group D throne. In the end, the Czechs were drastically unfortunate to win the game. After all, they had enough chances to win all three of their group matches in Amsterdam against their hosts. Their hosts had been booed off at half-time after a goalless first period, which only prompted the visitors to feast on their misery. Unfortunately, they hit the woodwork numerous times and fell victim to a soft penalty decision from the alleged cornerstone of modern-day officiating, known as Pierluigi Collina. Not about to look a gift horse in the mouth, Ronald de Boer converted the late penalty. The Dutch got into their team coach, which may as well have acted as a getaway vehicle from the crime scene that was the Amsterdam Arena. Czech Republic still had time to have a glorious chance to draw level in stoppage time though, and have one of their substitutes sent off. Summing the match-up, Johan Cruyff told his nation to send the referee a bouquet of flowers and be happy. Everybody in this group seemed to be fucking miserable. The Dutch weren't happy with their performances, the Danes weren't happy that their golden period was reaching its end, the Czechs were utterly furious with Collina, and even the French had something to moan about when the manager and the majority of players led a boycott on the media after criticism of their departing captain Didier Deschamps. Soon enough, they'd wake from their slumber. Well, not Denmark. They perished against the hosts in Rotterdam, even if the Dutch tried their hardest not to win a game of football for the second successive match. It took an hour, but the likes of Patrick Kluivert, Ronald de Boer and Bolo Zenden found the requisite goals to try and ignite the flaming Oranje. It was a result that somehow ended the group as a contest, despite only 2/3 of matches being played. That's because the winner from the earlier contest in Bruges was the world champions France, who yet again found solace in Thierry Henry and his early finish. Less a trademark Henry goal and more of a Czech gift, they were repaid in kind when Pavel Nedved was fouled for a penalty. Maybe with the persistent Czech complaining about officiating throughout the week, Graham Paul generously saw the foul as a penalty despite the act taking place outside the box. Not the worst error he'd make at a tournament. Karol Poborski gave the entire contest and group a new edge when converting the kick, but ultimately France dug in, found their winner through Yuri Djorkaeff on the hour to qualify. After 2 hours of some of the best football at the championships, Czech Republic were out as the nations of Romania, Turkey, Spain and Yugoslavia stole a living in the knockouts. French newspaper Libération ranked them as one of the 5th best teams in the competition, but they were somehow the first shown the door. Denmark saved their best performance of the tournament to last, having quickly followed the Czechs out of the competition, but it came too late. It didn't even contribute to any points either, as Vladimir Smyth's double belatedly claimed an overdue Czech triumph. Not that anybody was watching, like that indie banger reliant on word of mouth and Spotify streaming, the eyes and ears of the continent simply drifted to the top 40 gloop of dance pop between the moody favourites France and the imperfect co-hosts Netherlands, despite the fact that neither manager wanted to risk many star players for the occasion. After all, they'd seen their potential opponents for the quarter-final, and they knew that they were capable of easing to the final four. Pressure off though, one of the games of the tournament was allowed to happen, with a Frank de Boer thunderbolt of a free kick, the highlight in a 3-2 win for the Dutch. The entertainment soon gave way to sensible minds as 6 separate substitutions broke up the play enough to suck the life out of the contest. Winners, the Dutch, would remain on home soil of Rotterdam and Amsterdam, whilst France could be happy by remaining in their base on the other side of the border. With all remaining teams now warmed with happiness, only now could the knockouts commence. In hindsight, it's easy to say that the quarterfinals were cut and dry. In the absence of the unfortunate Czech Republic, misfiring reputable nations such as England, Germany and Scandinavian teams between golden ages in Sweden and Denmark, we simply had to make do with the decaying Romania, Yugoslavia and Turkey, who had expended all their energy and fortune in Yugoslavia's case to reach the knockouts. In Spain there was promise to upset the apple cart, but they had been drawn against the world champions and favourites France. Such was their reward for having the temerity to win their group. Plus, even against weaker opposition, they never fulfilled their promise anyway, did they? The lifeless undercard generated confidence out of the heavyweights. In Amsterdam, Portugal didn't have to be anywhere near their best to sack off Turkey as a concept at the Games. Luis Figo, just weeks away from his earth-shattering transfer between Classico clubs, used Turkey as his plaything. This was especially the case once Alpay fulfilled his promise from 4 years prior and actually got sent off, only this time the Turkish supporters weren't so happy to see the card. Nuno Gomes bagged twice thereafter and the tie was over. After barely lifting a finger to reach the semi-final, as well as having a day's rest on their semi-final opponent and showing all kinds of confidence, there was the growing suspicion that if anybody could defeat the French, it could be Portugal. Seconds out round 2, we saw more of the same later on in the evening in Brussels, as Italy barely had to break sweat in the Belgian capital to take apart Romania. Giorgi Hagi returned to the squad after his suspension, but couldn't rekindle the kind of form that had shown him shine over in the States 6 years prior. In fact, it could be said that he made his team worse. Up against an Italian team bristling with confidence, their man of the summer Francesco Totti broke the deadlock before Demetrio Albertini found Pippo Inzaghi for the forwards' third of the tournament. After the second half, Hagi finally snapped. After being fouled by a reckless Albertini challenge that might have warranted a red card in of itself if the referee applied any of the rules to the sport, he deemed it necessary to end his international career at the top level in disgrace. First, Hagi lunged for Antonio Conte as the two aged playmakers went for one another like a timid scrap in a nursing home. After that somehow didn't get a red card for an increasingly lenient referee, Hagi only needed 4 more minutes to see the red card that he came out of the half-time break looking for. Except the referee made it a trilogy of shocking decisions when he sent Hagi off for diving, despite Gianluca Zambrotta inadvertently clipping the Romanian's heels. Once the circus of that straightforward but chaotic Italian victory had died down, we started our conclusion of the quarter-finals with the remaining host in Rotterdam in typical Dutch fashion. Over the course of June's final week, we hit the mark on every single one of the Netherlands tournament cliches. First up, Johan Cruyff chucked a live grenade of a newspaper opinion piece into the camp. He told the nation who waited on him subserviently that things weren't as good as what they seemed, which was true. Then he took to individually slating players. He called Bergkamp weak, he stated that Kluivert had done nothing, and derided Edgar Davids for being more focused on the referee than playing good football. Bergkamp responded sarcastically, asking Cruyff if they should play better and lose, whilst Davids told Cruyff he knew nothing and that he'd never take him seriously again. Johan Neeskens, former Cruyff teammate and Rijkaard's assistant for the tournament, had seen it all before, so blew out his cheeks in exasperation as a second facet of the Netherlands played out in Rotterdam. That was brilliant football. If Cruyff's aim was to poke the bear, then it worked. Kluivert bagged himself a hat-trick as the Oranje became the first team in European Championship history to hit 6 goals in a single match. Yugoslavia were rightly dumped out of the tournament, but Savo Milosevic had to take a scrap of it home when his meaningless consolation snatched him an incomprehensible share of the Golden Boot alongside Kluivert. Even Cruyff was moved to declare the performance as awesome, before guiding his public to forget what he had said the prior week. And as for the third tentpole of Dutch football in major tournaments, stick around for the semis. First, France and Spain had to meet in Bruges for what looked like the only contest from a footballing standpoint in the quarter-final. Zinedine Zidane, who had performed in a fairly placid manner as he had done for Euro 96 and for large chunks of France 98, finally arrived at Euro 2000. Initially applauded by teammate Michel Salgado for the tactical nature of his foul, Augustin Aranzabal had just handed Zidane his berth into the tournament. Guardiola, overhearing Salgado's congratulations, couldn't share his point of view that the foul was so good because of the position Zidane found himself in from the dead ball. Zidane curled a free kick so good into the net, and Guardiola was left enraged, telling Salgado it wasn't so good now. It broke the deadlock, but not Spain's spirit, as they found an equaliser before half-time through Gais Comendieta. Even if they did hand France their advantage almost immediately back before the break, as Djorkaeff grabbed Lebleur's second. Faced with a question of stick or twist, France stuck on their slender advantage throughout the second half as Spain grew and grew into the game, despite Mendieta's ineffectiveness in open play. However, when it came down to it, Spain needed him on the pitch. When Fabian Barthez fouled Abelardo in stoppage time, Spain were awarded a second penalty and the chance to plunge the game into the chaos of golden goal extra time. Half an hour prior, however, Camacho had substituted Mendieta after his wretched performance, which left Raul stood over the ball from 12 yards. The only target he hit was presumably the bullseye on a supporter's face behind the goal, as he ballooned Spain's one remaining chance at Euro 2000 over the bar. France lived to fight another day, but they would be summoned to the golden goal extra time period by a stronger Portugal just 3 days later. Despite Zidane's best efforts in governing another game of football, it was the Seleção who went into the half-time in front thanks to Nuno Gomes, who kept up his brilliant knockout form. Unfortunately, he became the fall guy come the end of the elongated match. Thierry Henry earned his nation a further 30 minutes to go and win the match when he levelled shortly up after the half-time break. In a game of Russian roulette, France almost caught the bullet early on in extra time when João Pinto misfired when he shot wide. Equally dangerous were France as Robert Pires narrowly headed over. There would be a bullet in the chamber, and it was reserved for Portugal in controversial fashion. David Trezeguet was through on goal only to see his chance at becoming a French hero gobbled up by the loose grip of Vitor Baia in the Portuguese net. The ball spilled out to Sylvain Wiltord, who had the tightest of angles to creep a shot goalward, and tried his best to, only to strike the side netting. Then nothing seemed to be called. Was it a goal kick, corner, or something much more advantageous? Everyone looked at one another, the referee, his assistant deliberated before the replays conclusively showed the correct decision was reached. Abel Xavier, with the ball likely being fired harmlessly across the goal mouth, stuck out an arm to steer the ball out. He laid prone on the turf, perhaps too scared to receive his comeuppance or attempting to dissuade the referee from making a big call. Either way, it was a fucking Olivier Award winning acting compared to Stephen Taylor's platoon-style amateur dramatics some years later after his own goal line save for Newcastle United. And either way, the assistant saw through it. Portuguese rage boiled to the surface as the frogs, legs, snails, or whatever stereotypical French food you want to insert here for me into this metaphor readied themselves in the pan. Before Zidane could emulate Michel Platini by scoring an extra-time goal against Portugal in a European Championship semi-final, just as he had done by controlling a European Championship knockout game against Spain earlier that week, he had to watch Portugal emotionally check out. 4 minutes passed by before Zidane could take the kick. In the meantime, Nuno Gomes ruined his championships by striking the referee and joined Abel Xavier in a not-so-early shower. They both received lengthy bans, added Paulo Bento for fruitlessly attempting to grab the referee's red card. Vitor Bayer alleged conspiracy in the aftermath, whilst Portugal were reduced to 8 men of their own volition when Luis Figo removed himself from the field after the penalty decision. He knew Zidane would end the game instantly by converting the kick, and he did so. Portugal were graceless in defeat as France belatedly but calmly confirmed a second final in as many tournaments. Their final opponents would only be generated for them after yet more lunacy in the Dutch capital, as an even longer encounter took place between the Dutch and Italy, and it had to be seen to be believed. Cruyff's words were still ringing in their ears, and the Dutch came out ferociously in Amsterdam just as they had done against Yugoslavia. Italy were run ragged to the point that they were happy for a breather when Gianluca Zambrotta was sent off inside 34 minutes. Little did they know they had another game's worth of chasing after Dutch shadows in the baking Amsterdam heat ahead of them. It really shouldn't have got this far, but we have to thank the third cliché of the Netherlands tournament exit: penalties. When Alessandro Nesta pulled back Patrick Kluivert in the penalty box, Frank de Boer was more than happy to grab the ball to break the deadlock from 12 yards. Unlike his nerveless but undeserving winner all the way back against the Czech Republic in the first game, the Crystal Palace de Boer twin was thwarted by the goalkeeper. Still, this was not the horror of 92 or 96 just yet. It was normal time, and a response could still be found, and furthermore was likely to be found against a wayward and disadvantaged Italian outfit. It didn't take long for another penalty to be won, this time Edgar Davids skipping past his Juventus teammate Mark Giuliano. After the Dutch midfielder was brought down, the referee awarded the kick, and tellingly, Patrick Kluivert snatched the ball for the penalty this time. Francesco Totti in the Italian net was beaten, all ends up, but Italy weren't, as the woodwork came to their rescue. It wasn't beyond the realm of imagination that Italy could have been reduced to 8 men as both Giuliano and Di Biagio escaped punishments for their bad tackles. What's borderline laughable is that Italy should have had the game wrapped up in injury time when Marco Del Vecchio had the chance to win it, but instead felt sorry for his opponents and softly shot into Edwin van der Sar's welcoming grasp. After an intense 30 minutes of ride-or-die football, Netherlands chose death anyways. The final whistle marked only the beginning of yet more Dutch torment from 12 yards. Lucky to be on the field, Di Biagio and substitute Gianluca Pessotto both converted as Dutch ghosts solemnly appeared. As Frank de Boer's kick was almost smothered at point-blank range by the on-rushing Toldo, the memory of Marco van Basten and 92 returned. As Jaap Stam tried to put his penalty into Belgium, Clarence Seedorf's miss of 96 reminded Dutch supporters of their inadequacies. Then the biggest heap of salt to the deepest of wounds was applied by Francesco Totti, with a generously sized spoon, or El Cucciao as it would become known. An audacious panenka for the new age football as the Dutch stood on the brink of a third straight Euros elimination from 12 yards. Kluivert partly atoned for his normal time errors next, but it came too late. Even if Paolo Maldini did prolong Dutch agony by missing, it came down to Paul Bosvelt, a jobbing midfielder playing defender in his team, who would be the type of player forgetfully signed by a pre-Mansour Manchester City. His tame kick was collected by Toldo, ending Dutch hopes at Euro 2000. Even for a weary Netherlands numb to the prospect of penalties, this was a harrowing way to exit. In Rotterdam then, we were left with 2 of the 3 best teams in the competition when Italy met France in somehow the first Euros encounter between the two. Earning his call-up back to the starting 11 was Italy's man of the tournament in Francesco Totti. In a match that could almost be pitted, Totti versus Zidane, the Italian won on points in personal performance. When the going got tough, Zidane cowered for the first time in the tournament in a match more governed by the Italians and Totti than the French. Of all the armoury in Italy's ranks up front, from the free-scoring but immobile Pippo Inzaghi to the prolific and talismanic Francesco Totti, to the mercurial Alessandro Del Piero and in-form Vincenzo Montella, it was an Italian attacker finding the net for the very first time who broke the deadlock. 2 minutes after Del Piero's introduction, Marco Del Vecchio stabbed in his first international goal in the second half that looked set to dampen France's millennium. They looked shot, outfought and all out of ideas as they kept pushing fruitlessly for the equaliser with minimal breakthrough. Still, the Italy chances kept coming as the fresh Alessandro Del Piero found himself through on goal not once, but twice. First, he scuffed a glorious chance wide, then he struck the on-rushing Fabien Barthez's foot. France had used all of their 9 lives up, as Alessandro Del Piero's wayward finishing could be characterised to a man wildly out of form and fitness after missing large swathes of the period between international tournaments through injury. Still, they didn't need to hold on, as France were offering much as the clock ebbed into stoppage time. Italian tracksuits in the dugout were being unzipped, ready to unfurl onto the Dutch turf as they rampaged to all 4 corners of Rotterdam to celebrate their second European Championship. Then, Sylvain Wiltord struck from an inopportune angle that squeaked through an hitherto unflappable Francesco Totti. From a man who had faced 6 penalties, nearly 6 full matches of tournament football and had only had to pick the ball out of his net twice to let the shot past him, was heartbreaking. Italians slumped back to their bench, the promise of their glory whipped out from under them. They never got going again as tired legs influenced tired minds when Demetrio Albertini's lax control allowed Robert Pires to steal in the final third. Attacking the same half as Wiltord's equaliser, Pires calmly found his fellow substitute David Trezeguet, who funded in the last kick of the tournament. The tournament was seized for the second Euros in succession thanks to the golden goal. A golden team in Italy beaten only by a generational France in both 1998 and 2000 and by shady refereeing in 2002, walked away from the era with nothing. France, who violently unimpressed at Euro 96, had retooled under home comforts 2 years earlier and snatched everything. Even though the sheer hype train quality of football and star quality can often make it feel nigh on impossible for an international tournament to be bad, it is a once-in-a-blue-moon occasion when all the stars align to create a truly great international competition. First off, there needs to be true quality and drama in the games. The group stage tussles between Spain and Yugoslavia as well as France and the Netherlands prove as much in both aspects. When Netherlands and France attempted to one-up each other in the terms of high-stakes drama when it came to their exploits in the golden goal of extra time in the semi-final. Secondly, the biggest footballers of the day need to turn out and put in a great shift. This was the first time we were treated to Zinedine Zidane grabbing a full tournament by the scruff of its neck. His future Galactico teammate Luis Figo didn't do too badly in leading a dark horse Portugal side either. Then you've got Patrick Kluivert, who won the Golden Boot, Francesco Totti too, who probably ought to have won the Golden Ball. And finally, the outer cast needs to be stacked. In this case, you had a quirky Slovenian outfit with Zlatko Zavic at its heart, you had Savo Milosevic and the chaotic Yugoslavs, and incredibly, an unfortunate Czech team who deserved a spot in the knockouts. It all combined to serve up the perfect football tournament. As the 21st century rumbled on, Portugal would host the next edition. Just how could it possibly live up to the heights? Well, it'd have its own X factor, the shock of the millennium, and we'll be discussing that tomorrow.